Welcome back to the YouTube and podcast homes for BamaOnLine.com. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BOL, alongside senior recruiting editor Andrew Bone, and right down there in the middle square, Tim White, site publisher for BamaOnLine.com. And guys, we have a special pre-Christmas edition of the show as we move through Alabama's early 2024 signing class. We talk about some things that's players that might still be out there, targets that might still be out there. And we're going to get into some grades for this early signing period and the Alabama Crimson Tide as well. I got my Christmas colors on, guys. I'm ready to get into these presents that Alabama fans are looking forward to getting their first look or two at on the football field coming up, guys.
You look festive.
Yeah, I
Andrew,
feel festive.
not so much. Me and Andrew, we're playing the role of Grinch this
Andrew,
year.
Dad, he gets a pass on everything. You know, if Andrew showed up in a robe right now, I think we could probably let that go, Andrew, with where you're at.
Yeah, I just grab whatever's on the floor and toss it on.
I'm gonna be honest. I go to the hoodie rack and grab whatever I think I didn't wear last time.
Exactly. Try to mix it up.
I got a little bit of Jim Harbaugh in me in that regard.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh coming up in just a couple weeks for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Guys, we wanted to sort of pick things up where we left them on Wednesday. We had the live signing show. So during that program, we did see that Kevin Riley, the running back from Tuscaloosa County, signed with Alabama, flipping from Miami. There was actually some really good things that happened for this class, right? Down the stretch. Steve Mbumoy, the Canadian defensive end, signs with Alabama. You also look at Bubba Hampton flipping from Texas to Alabama. Andrew, it was a strong finish to this class, at least for now, understanding there's still some moving pieces as we look ahead to the immediate future.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot that, getting into signing day and being able to keep all the kids that you had and not losing any, is just as big a win as any of them, because there were some guys, especially down the home stretch, who were being heavily pursued. Caleb Odom, Ole Miss was trying to flip him. You had Jameer Grimsley, who received a lot of in-state pressure from Florida. Sterling Dixon mentioned that Auburn was making a run at him kind of at the last minute. Of course, you still have to wait on next month with Ryan Williams, but being able to add 4 new additions to your recruiting class in the last week, obviously really big, and not just the last week, since Monday. You get Jay-Sean Ross last Monday, outside linebacker, edge rusher out of Kansas City, and then signing day, pretty eventful with the 2 flips from Kevin Riley and Boa Hampton, and then Steve Muola from Canada, who originally from Cameroon. And I said this on the show the other day. The most interesting part about his commitment was he told me on Tuesday night that he had committed to Alabama the week of the USF game. So he'd been committed for a long time. Didn't take any other visits. I guess that's why he did not take any other visits throughout the process, that he committed back in September. But great week for Alabama. Currently ranked as the number 2 recruiting class in the country.
Look, I think Steve needs credit for showing true love, right? He watched that South Florida game and said, "I'm coming." You know what I mean?
Y'all need me.
Well, he knew USF was going to go on to win a bowl game and have 7 wins. So he knew the quality of USF before we did.
Routed Syracuse, indeed. But yeah, hats off to Steve. I think it just depends on your personality. To me, it was a great signing day. It was a great signing week leading into it. A lot of the talk was on Edric Houston. Alabama did a terrific job getting him on campus, putting the full court pitch, even making it a discussion. And while they did that, they ended up avoiding that with a lot of guys. Like Andrew said, Jameer Grimsley, heavy pressure up until pen met paper. A lot of these guys, heavy pressure, they don't really advertise, hey, we're going after these guys, and might not get them, but they definitely was burning some midnight oil, trying to flip some Bama guys. And again, you kept what you had. You had to be happy. Added a few pieces. I love Bubba Hampton, what he can do. Kevin Riley, big fan of what Kevin Riley's going to be able to do in a football field. And a need position, had to get a running back. And to me, that's a solid grade on a running back in a 1 running back class so far. Of course, with Daniel Hill still out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that as we talk about moving forward now from the early signing date and understanding the Ryan Williams situation will carry over, it looks like, into the new year. And also running back, because we had talked about the potential for a two running back class. Is that still in play, guys? And maybe the lines of scrimmage continue to work some things up front too. Go ahead, Tim.
I'm sorry. Shoot, Andrew. I was giving Andrew a chance. Tried to be
Oh,
polite.
yeah. Gonna let Uncle Tim talk.
What are we talking about? The offensive line, Travis?
Well, we're talking about the running back situation,
Yeah.
talking about Ryan Williams, just some things that are going to carry over into that new year.
I think you kind of expected, Ryan said he wanted to commit on his birthday. And again, I know people see this as a different way from Ryan than I do, and Ryan does and other people. But this guy, the whole if he's committed, he's been a 24 commitment for what, 3 weeks? So he's had this little small window to take visits. And I get it's not ideal. I get that if you're an Alabama fan, it's not ideal. You'd love to have a top 5 national player signed and been done with, right? But in the day of the portal, I just don't think there's a cheat code. I think you have to recruit him to stay, let him take visits, because, you get a kid on campus, any kid, he's unhappy. There's no more we got him for 3 years, right? You got him for 2 months. We've seen guys, we saw Zach Evans a couple of years ago sign with Georgia and get out of it basically the next day. So these kids have options now. So they got to come because they love you. And a lot of them are saying, hey, just in case I hit the portal, which I think was the case with Edric Houston, maybe if something goes wrong, I know where I'm going to go. So a lot of factors come into play. But, yeah, I'm glad there's a little excitement in the late period myself.
What are you keeping your eyes on, Andrew, as we move forward?
Obviously, the Ryan Williams situation. He continues to tell us that he's solid with the commitment, but anytime you continue to take visits, it's always something to watch. He wants to visit Texas, LSU, Auburn, obviously get back to Tuscaloosa. So we're going to be watching Ryan pretty closely. There's going to be 2 announcements at the All-American Bowl on January the 6th. Daniel Hill, 4-star running back out of Meridian, who supposedly signed on Wednesday. We do know that he signed during the early signing period. Not sure 100% if it was Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, but we know he signed. And, it's down between Alabama, South Carolina, Mississippi State. We're going to be watching that one pretty closely. Zay Mincy, top 30 overall player in the country out of Daytona Beach. He signed on Thursday night. It was either Alabama, Florida, or Miami. So that's another big one that we're watching. Heading into the late period, there's not a lot of guys that are out there. You have Terry Bosey, who is the 5-star athlete out of Texas, committed to Texas A&M, as mentioned. He wants to take official visits, or not officials, unofficial visits. Alabama, LSU. Those are some schools that he's visited in the past and wants to go check out. Again, I think the biggest thing that we're probably going to also watch is the transfer portal. Who else emerges? Who decides to come in for a visit? Maybe after the Christmas holidays in January. Who does Alabama decide that they really need to target, and at what position? We've heard obviously some names behind the scenes that they're at least talking to. So we'll see if some of those guys make visits next month.
Guys, how much does the portal and that window carrying over into the first few days of the new year kind of complicate things for recruiting staffs? In other words, you've got some big time targets that you continue to work from the high school level that are going to wait until that late signing period. But maybe you've got some entrance into the transfer portals that has interest in your school. I guess that's what you get paid for, right? You have a very strong feeling for where you're at with these guys, because there's going to be some impressive portal names that we've already seen that you're probably going to have to say no to, perhaps, to maintain harmony in some ways with some guys you're still recruiting from the high school level, Tim.
Yeah, it's guerrilla math. That's what I call it. It's guerrilla math, trying to figure out who's going in the portal, who you want from the portal, who you've got signed, who can you commit, is he firm? There's a lot of factors in play. And like you said, there's more. I know from a talent standpoint, it often looks like a no-brainer. Hey, Travis Reier's in the portal. This is a no-brainer. He was ranked really high out of high school. I think you can take that factor and throw it away. because you're factoring in NIL, you're factoring in your roster. How does that guy shake up your room? You know what I mean? You bring in the wrong guy and you have 3 guys hit the portal, that 1 for 3, with a lot of these transfer guys being 1 year eligible for the draft. You know, I know Evan Stewart's been talked about a lot, and he is a talented guy, but there's a lot that goes into Evan. There's a lot that went into LT Overton. You know, there's a lot that went into play for these guys trying to figure it out. And hey, look, I know as fans and even in the media, we love to look at the roster and think we know, but we don't know half of what we believe we know. They know what they need. They know who they're having talks with these guys. They've seen them on the practice field. They know their needs areas way more than we do. So it's not as simple. If I had to identify an area Bama should attack the portal, wide receiver would not be where I'd start. That would not be that would not be first. I'd go defensive line, offensive line right out of the gate, maybe linebacker. Wide receiver would be on down the list.
What would your shopping list for the portal look like right now, Andrew? You kind of in sync with Tim, or you got another area or two that you might look?
Yeah, I mean, I think, O-line, D-line, especially after Alabama, you look at Alabama's offensive line and defensive line class, 3 players at each of those position groups. Yeah, I think those are some areas that they're going to look, see who's available, not make any terrible decisions. They're not going to try to make any bad investments. They're going to try to go after somebody that they can bring in that can make an impact, but probably not going to cost a ton. So on the NIL front, so yeah, I think anytime you start seeing guys come out and say NIL is not important, and for these transfer portal guys, a lot of times it still is. So got to make some right decisions. O-line, D-line, I think probably secondary. That might be an area that they look, especially with Kool-Aid leaving. Terrion Arnold's got to, I think there's a good chance that he could potentially leave as well. So I think a lot's just going to kind of depends on some of these decisions after bowl season from some of the star players on Alabama's team and who they feel like they really need to go after.
Guys, you ready to get into some early National Signing Day grades as we look at this haul to this point?
For sure.
Let's do it. Hey, let's start right there behind center. I think this is a pretty easy one. I never benefited from an easy A at any point during my academic history. But boy, I got to think with Julian Sayin, the nation's top quarterback prospect for the 2024 cycle, not only signed, but already in Tuscaloosa. You talk about just his ability, his talent, his intangibles, and then the fact you're already working with him. Pretty much a slam dunk. I got to think, Andrew, we'll start with yours.
Absolutely. And, Tim mentioned this in our class superlatives that we dropped on BamaOnLine the other day. No drama at all throughout the entire process. Julian committed to Alabama when Bill O'Brien was still the offensive coordinator in Tuscaloosa. And when Bill left, he was 100% throughout the entire process, was a big recruiter behind the scenes. He was a top 3 quarterback in the country a year ago, but then going through the summer camp circuit, going to a lot of 7-on-7s during the spring, going to the Elite 11, winning it, and then having a senior season where he passed for, I think his completion percentage was over 75%. I mean, this is as good of a get as there is in the country. Obviously, number 1 quarterback, coming on the heels of Alabama signing 2 quarterbacks in last year's class. Big win there. So I think we could easily give that not necessarily an A, but I think an A+.
What are you thinking, Tim? Same thing?
Yeah. I mean, you look at that and, you follow him with super talented DJ Lagway. I mean, very talented guy. Dylan Raiola, a lot of drama around both of those. And that's not to say anything. I mean, that's kind of the game. That's not a knock on them. But again, going back to you committed to Bill O'Brien, now you're coming to play for Tommy Rees. You know what I mean? That's a big deal. Talent-wise, A+ across the board, intangibles, smart. So, he's kind of cut different, in that regard. I mean, just the low key, because quarterbacks, we've seen it several cycles. I mean, we've always seen it, but several cycles in a row, we've seen high drama. I mean, was it last year that Florida had the guy committed?
Got NIL'd.
NIL, he bounces. We saw Florida had a guy committed that jumped up 7 grades and ended up signing with Ole Miss. We've seen so much quarterback drama. So not to have any, on the heels of not having any drama with guys like Dylan, Julian Sayin, Ty Simpson, Eli Holstein. You got to feel that quarterback room's pretty solid with mature, equal-minded guys.
Let's talk running backs. Kevin Riley, as we outlined earlier and on the live show Wednesday, flips from Miami to Alabama. And as you guys have already talked about today, possibility for a second back to join this class still is out there. As we sit here right now, Andrew, what type of grade do we have for the running back spot?
Go A minus. I mean, I think that, if you get another back, which Alabama would like to have a second back in this class, you're in a solid A right there. I mean, this is coming off the heels of Alabama signing 2 top 4 running backs in the country, and Justice Haynes and Richard Young. And then we went into this past weekend, our last weekend, without a single running back commitment. And, Alabama was able to get Kevin Riley on campus, who's the number 3 back in the country. Was able to flip him away from Miami. And there was some late drama, obviously, with some other guys, Kewan Lacey, who a lot of people thought it was an Alabama-Ole Miss battle. He ends up going to Mizzou. Jaden Ball, who had told some people that he was going to Alabama, ends up committing and signing with Florida on Wednesday. But Alabama being able to flip Kevin Riley, a local kid, big-time get for them there. And we'll kind of see what happens with Daniel Hill in the next week and a half.
Where you at with this one, Timmy?
Yeah, there was a lot of drama at our running back position. I think Alabama was confident they were getting a good running back, what they were going to do, which one they were going to get. I felt very strongly they were getting Kewan Lacey. We felt it. Everybody felt Bama was a team to beat. Got kind of NIL heavy. Alabama bounced, ended up a little Ole Miss, like Andrew said, ends up in Missouri. Jaden Ball, it's funny. We had guys committed to Nebraska nobody really talked about. And then you got all these teams fighting over him in the late period. Jaden Ball is another one, committed to Arkansas. I tip my hat to Robert Gillespie, who had to really do some work. He had to figure out that Rubik's Cube on getting these guys done. And, Kevin Riley, right there in your own backyard, figuring it out. But we're spoiled. As Alabama fans, you're spoiled, right? It's hard to give. I mean, you look at the running back grades over history, you're like last year. That's an A+. Kevin's, it's like he's down. But I agree with Andrew. I think it's a solid B+, A grade, because if you look at him as a talent, he's a top 50 type running back, top 75 type running back, bigger than most people think. I've had a lot of people describe him as small, but I mean, this guy's 6 foot tall, bordering on 200 at 17 years old. So, and again, Daniel Hill sitting out there can push that grade higher, big bully, bulldozer type. If they end up with Daniel Hill, to me, it's the tight end version of yin and yang that Alabama's got that we'll get into. Odom and Lindsey, you'd have Hill and you'd have Kevin Riley, kind of like that perfect tag team duo.
Speaking of tight ends, I'm going to meld the tight ends with the wide receivers for our next position group. And you talk about Caleb Odom and Lindsey at the tight end spots. And then what looks to be right now more of a 3 wide receiver class. Again, Ryan Williams yet to sign, but we know a couple of talented guys went ahead and went through with their signatures on Wednesday. And I guess a bit of a wild card in Bubba Hampton. Not sure where you guys are going with him right now, on which side of the ball. The beauty of that situation, I think he helps anywhere he lands on this football team. Andrew,
we'll just say offense for now.
Yeah, we'll say offense. Okay, we'll put him on offense. I'm good with him on offense.
That's not saying he's an offensive. I mean, he plays on both sides of the ball. So we'll just, for the sake of the grades, we'll count him in the offensive side, because the defensive back's already getting a pretty high grade. So
and Andrew, don't spoil it. What are you doing?
High grades are, for me, they're C+.
No spoilers.
And in terms, I mean, he's 5'10", and that's not to say he can't be a great corner at Alabama. But we know corners at Alabama, the critical factors and those things that Saban looks for, it usually starts around 6 foot. And again, watching this guy on tape, I have no doubt if you put him at corner, you put him at star, he would be just fine at 5'10", but we'll stick with him at wide receiver. And so with that designation, Andrew, let's get a grade for all these guys. And are you going ahead and including Ryan Williams in this, even though he is yet to sign?
I'll include Ryan when he signs.
Okay.
I think as of right now, we're looking at the signing class, and I think you can give it a solid A. I mean, A+ when Ryan signs that letter of intent. But as of right now, it's an A. I mean, you get a Mr. Football Award winner in the state of Tennessee and Amari Jefferson, which was a big win there for Alabama. They flipped him away from Tennessee baseball program, but Tennessee football program was pushing hard there. Georgia was pushing hard. Georgia was considered the front runner for him. Rico Scott, who I said in our class superlatives the other day, is probably, in my opinion, the class sleeper. And it's a kid who had 1,200 yards receiving, 23 receiving touchdowns as a senior. Was an early take for Alabama. I mean, he worked out at Alabama's camp before his junior season, and he was quickly one of their top wide receiver targets. And then you look at the tight end group, and as Tim noted, yin and yang. Caleb Odom, guy who can stretch the field at 6'4", 220 pounds. Number one tight end recruit in the country, according to On3 Sports. And then Jay Lindsey, who I've compared him to Robbie Oots a lot. This is a very physical, solid blocker. And that's all Alabama thought he was at first, was just a really good physical blocker. And he goes to Alabama's camp, runs a 4.65. They saw that he could catch the ball a little bit. So I know that they're excited about both of those guys at the tight end position in this class.
What do you got, Tim?
The thing about Hampton, I got a little crazy watching him and digging in. He reminds me of, I think he's either Tyrone Prothro or I think he's Javier Arenas, which is a pretty good place to fall. You know what I mean? I think you project him on either side. I think you figure it out. I mean, his play, he is a playmaker on offense. Huge get. I mean, I love Amari Jefferson. We'll see him in an all-star game. We don't talk about him enough. Kind of quiet recruitment there. I love the tight ends. I think Jay Lindsey, the more I hear about him, the more I hear how physical he is. And playing against smaller kids, he's finally going to have a challenge. Those guys will want to, wrestle with their own. I think he's going to do really well. And he's like a better catch than Robbie Oots, like Andrew said. He's a guy a little bit more athletic. Robbie's a good athlete, but kind of a little bit smaller, not as tall, thicker, more of an H-back. But I think Lindsey can grow into that. And Caleb Odom, that was a full court press. I made reference to it before about Ole Miss. That was about a full court press as it get. His mom loves Alabama. So A across, Ryan Williams would make it A++ for me. So I give it a solid A right now with everything. Rico Scott is built like a running back. I mean, when you look at this Joker, he's built, he also looks like a safety. Yeah. He's got that build where this guy looks like he can get downhill and get behind his pads and lay you out. So you get wide receivers built like that. I've seen a lot of slim guys come through the program, smaller guys and, Bond and Kobe and them. So, really good job. Hallman Wiggins did a terrific job. Joe Cox, really good work getting those tight ends signed.
Let's get into the offensive line. A 5-man class a year ago was heavy on tackle types. We've seen Ola Salinan as a freshman work more inside, but Miles McVay, Wilkin Formby, obviously Caden Proctor. So looking at this group, smaller in numbers, and I guess, Andrew, more of an emphasis on the interior this time around. And as Tim talked about earlier, and you did too, the possibility for the portal to impact this area, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly going to be an area that they look in the portal, see who's available, probably after the bowl game. But last year signed a lot of tackles. I think they signed 4 tackles last year. Of course, 1 or 2 of those guys could potentially move into the interior, but they signed Caden Proctor last year, which I think was a little bit of a challenge for them in this cycle as far as recruiting some guys, including Jordan Seaton, who they missed out on because he wants to be a left tackle. And Alabama has a starting freshman at the left tackle position, but there was certainly a big emphasis on the interior. 3 of the top 15 interior offensive linemen in the country committed to Alabama. Casey Poe, top interior line, William Sanders, Joe Ionata. I think Alabama's really excited about that group overall. I'd probably give it probably a B+, just because I know that they were hoping to add another tackle in this class. Didn't really see a lot of guys that they were really in love with, but Jordan Seaton being a big miss down the home stretch, but that was always going to be a tough challenge.
What do you got, Tim?
Yeah, I'm going to go A. I like the interior guys. I think they're nasty. I think they're ugly. I think they're mean. I think they want to fight you. I saw a play in the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game when a guy was running down the sidelines, and William Sanders was like leading the charge after pulling. It was crazy. This big boy running down the sideline at that size. All of them, Casey Poe, we know what he can do. Ionata, a little bit of chip on their shoulder. And we know Wilford likes those kind of guys, those guys that'll get in there and fist fight and do all that stuff. I agree with Andrew. Partly for me, I knew the odds of adding a significant tackle were slim. I mean, basically there was 2 on the board, right? You had Favor Edwin, who, ended up with Auburn, just a complete project, big upside guy, raw, not a guy that's going to come in and help early. And then you got Jordan Seaton. He still has Jordan Seaton's a guy that, had all that drama, committed on TV, had everything going behind him. Definitely a talented guy. But now you got to wonder, what would he have been like in your locker room? You know what I mean? You got to wonder. There's so much drama with him, but he is a super talented guy. So I sort of subdued my tackle expectations after the haul last year.
Let's get into the defensive line. Let's move over to the other side of the football, and let's get into this class and this mix. It looks like they have guys. Jeremiah Beeman is a guy, when you look at his measurables, you think positional versatility as he moves throughout his development at Alabama. Kind of the same for Steve Mbumoy as well. And then a real banger, it looks like, in Isaiah Fonga. Talk about it, Andrew. The needs maybe that Alabama addressed, and sort of your anticipation, big picture wise, of what to expect from these guys.
You look back in the spring, and you look at some of the guys that they had at the top of their recruiting board on the defensive front, and we didn't get into the summer or the fall with Jeremiah Beeman or Isaiah Fonga as guys that kind of emerged late. They were guys that were at the top of Alabama's defensive line board back in the spring. They were heavily pursued. Fonga was committed to Utah. He made an early commitment to Utah. His uncle's defensive ends coach there. He's from Las Vegas, so there was a connection out there. But when you have Alabama, Texas really pushing hard to flip your commitment, I think we're going to look back in 3 or 4 years and say that this was probably one of the most underrated players in Alabama's recruiting class. I mean, he had an unbelievable senior season. I think double-digit sacks, 28, 29 tackles for loss, helped Central High School to a state championship. And then you had Jeremiah Beeman at a Parker High School in Montgomery, or Parker High School in Birmingham. A lot of pressure on him late with Auburn. I mean, Auburn was pushing very, very hard to flip, and there was some confidence coming out of Auburn maybe about a month or so ago. But Alabama was able to hold on to him, and then you're able to get Steve out of Canada, which this is a kid that looks the part, and he's coming in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder as well. And I think Alabama's really excited about this whole group. Overall, I'd probably give it a B plus. There's some guys that I feel like can make an impact maybe a little bit further down the road. I think they would have liked to have added one more defensive lineman to the group, and maybe they do that in the transfer portal. But I guess you got to add in LT Overton in that mix as well.
I was going to say,
Absolutely.
does that change your grading? If you look at
probably
Overton?
not. I think with Overton, you're excited about him, but he's also needs to. He's on campus, but he needs to get some weight on him. I think he was in that under 260 pounds when he stepped foot on campus a couple weeks ago, and certainly a guy that I think Alabama is excited about his potential once he adds some more solid weight.
Tim, what do you got for the defensive line?
I'm excited about a few of these guys. Faga, I was excited about him from day one. I think we all were. Not ideal size, that was the question. But, the little stuff I look at, like, again, Joseph Hastings pointed out that when they took the photo, the team photo, all the defensive linemen on his visit went and got in the photo with him. You know what I mean? So he's going to be a military family, I believe. He's going to be built right mentally. He's going to be great in the locker room. You got a guy that's running on that field to practice, a guy that's willing to go in there. It's going to set the tone for a lot of other guys. Beeman's the most talented. Steve's ridiculous. Steve reminds me, I did a camp a long time ago. I didn't love doing camps, and they were a pain in the butt. But I remember Jolston Fowler came walking up next to me, the old Bama fullback from Viger, going in his junior year, and he took his shirt off. And I was like, would you get the hell away from me? You make me look like a friggin' clown. Get away from me. That's how Steve looks. Like just grown man, 35-year-old professional weightlifter. He's going to be a little bit raw, but that's okay. That's, you're not supposed to, not many defensive linemen come to any university polished, right? So that's the irony. I guess I'll tirade a little, but defensive linemen go for a lot NIL wise. They go for, their high picks in the draft. They go for a lot, very high, probably pretty close to right underneath quarterbacks, but not many are ready to come in and make an impact, right? So you can go to the portal and get a guy with 2 years experience, 2 years of late weight room. It's like the Pirates in baseball. Let them build them and train them. Then we'll go sign them and work them up. So I think that's going to be the mentality with a lot of defensive linemen. But Beeman, again, he's a super talented guy. And I really like the work ethic and what Steve and Fonga's going to bring to the table.
Let's get into the linebackers. And by the way, maybe we'll give Steve the Ashawn Robinson older beyond his years award.
Oh,
Ashawn
man.
was kind of that guy too.
Ashawn looks younger now than he did in high school. You know what I mean? That's how old he looked.
Botox or something. Hey, Andrew, let's get into these linebackers. Tim, let's get into these linebackers because it looks like a nice mix right now between the inside and edge positions. And really, this is a class where at those two spots, inside and outside, Alabama started everywhere from in-state to Europe to find the guys it wanted to this point in that linebacker class.
Yeah, I think after last year's class where Alabama was able to sign 3 5-star edge rushers, there was certainly a bigger emphasis on inside linebacker in this year's class, and they were able to get an early commitment last December from Sterling Dixon out of Spanish Fort, who had just won the Class 3A Lineman of the Year at Mobile Christian. Then he goes transfers to Spanish Fort and had another unbelievable season and already on campus. Working out with the team, rehabbing with the team right now. Had shoulder surgery, but good to get him on campus. And then, I think the biggest thing about this whole linebacker class is you have guys that have played, a few different positions. You have Caden Jones, who's 6'4", 220 pounds, who's played safety, who's played wide receiver, he's played linebacker. He's a guy that can kind of move all over, but was recruited as an inside guy. Justin Okaroa out of Munich, Germany. This is a kid who's 6'3", 225 pounds, ran a 4.5 40 at Alabama's competition. Hard to gauge that, but I think he's a kid that we get to see early on special teams in Tuscaloosa. And then Ja'Shawn Ross, late addition for Alabama, 6'4", 220 pounds, played wide receiver and linebacker, had a really good senior season, and that's when Alabama noticed him back in November. And that's the thing about Alabama is they're going to continue to evaluate kids all the way until the end. They don't just go through the summer and stop and just focus on those guys that they saw in the spring and summer. They're going to continue to evaluate. Or you're going to miss out on guys like a Josh Jacobs or an Eddie Lace or an Eddie Jackson. I mean, those are some guys that emerged late. Christian Barmore. So is that guy potentially in line with those guys? Who knows? But it just goes to show you that Alabama's going to evaluate and recruit all the way until the end.
Always bet on talent, right? And some guys with some serious upside and positional versatility, as you outlined there, Andrew. What about you, Tim? What do you got for these backers?
I'm pretty excited about Sterling Dixon. I know he's not ideal sized, but I think the game's changed where it's about getting to the quarterback. I go back to that South Florida game where they took like the DB, the safety, and put him in end and just caused havoc, right? Mm-hmm. He was not ideal size for that end, but boy, he was a mess for Alabama, hard to deal with, rush. You get Sterling, a guy like that, is very athletic. Again, was injured, banged up a little bit, very athletic, ton of schools were after him early on. Really can get to the ball. But I think Justin's the one I'm the most excited for. He's going to play in the All-American Bowl, the size. I mean, I don't know who that competition was. I'm going to be honest. I don't know if that was the Mean Green Machine from the old Longest Yard movie. Some of those guys on the sideline were holding children. So I'm not sure who he was playing. It looked like some grown men. It looked like a mixture, but he was really good, tested really well. And the thing, you look at this with some of these guys, just because the public, we can't see him or it's hard to judge, say Rico Scott, he plays not great competition. Justin, we don't know what kind of competition. We've seen that a lot. Kobe Prentice. But if they've had him in camp, I mean, you got to trust your coach's evals. You got to trust it's not one guy getting one coach getting eyes on him. You know what I mean? If it's a DB, the wide receiver coach is also seeing how he works. So you got to trust their camp evals. And you get a guy from Germany, you get a guy from Canada, you get a guy like Fogga. You kind of like that locker room. And I think we've seen that. We saw it in 2020. I think we're seeing it this year. I feel like the locker room is really important. The culture. Everybody can say culture. I feel like Alabama's got a really good culture, and I think that factors into the guys they're recruiting.
Alabama. Wait, so what's the grade? What's the grade?
The grade, I would go B- with some uncertainty. Like to see. I think there's upside with every one of these guys. Caden, Justin, Jayson Ross. I think all their best football's ahead of them, honestly. But we got a short dose of Justin. A lot of uncertainty, although I love him. We got a small. Jayson Ross, he was spending a lot of time on offense going in, had a great senior year. I think the upside's there, but coming in right now, I'll go B- because I want to be a little different.
Just be a little different. That's Tim Watts. Put that on his
headstone maybe one day. I'm not a role model, kids. Do not do what I do.
Hey, let's talk secondary. And you talk about a class that I'm figuring you guys are going to have pretty lofty grades for. I mean, this group, when you go player by player, Andrew, it's like you could almost already go ahead and put a dime package out there with these guys and nickel or dime package and feel pretty good about it.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from this class is 5 of the 6 signees are already on campus, and the 6th is going to be there first week of January. I mean, this is just a ridiculous class, top to bottom. 6 signees. You got guys at corner, you got guys at safety, guys that can make an impact. I really like Jalen Mbakwe. We saw him in the state championship game against Saraland. He started as a quarterback this season, and got it done. I mean, I think he had 4 touchdowns in the state championship game, but he's going to be a defensive back for the Crimson Tide, and I think he's got a chance to see the field early. Peyton Woodyard, being able to flip him away from Georgia, plays him and Xavier Brown, guys that plays at St. John Bosco and made a day out in California to the top high school football programs in the country. So they've got the right mindset. They're going to be prepared when they start practicing, or they already have started practicing. But once they kind of go through the spring, I think those guys have the right mindset to potentially see some early playing time. You flip a guy like Red Morgan away from Florida State, Jameer Grimsley, 6 foot 2.5 cornerback that Alabama was in love with since the spring. I mean, they really pushed hard there. They were able to secure an early commitment, but holding off Florida in the end was certainly a challenge. And then you're able to get the first Nick Saban era legacy recruit in Dre Kirkpatrick Jr., who had a really good senior season. I mean, I think he had a total of 11 or 12 special teams touchdowns and really was the star of the Gadsden City team this year. So great job there in the secondary. I would give it an A+.
What about it, Tim?
I love this group. I feel like when we're looking at this, I feel like we haven't really talked about the secondary for some reason, and it's fantastic. I don't know why. We really didn't talk about Jalen. I'm including myself in this. Ryan Williams was fantastic in that state championship game. Jalen was dueling banjos. He was every bit as good, except he was facing a 9-man front. I mean, they were all coming. They're like, Jalen was screaming, "I'm running." And they were coming up, just a big, strong guy, made a lot of plays. I was out there on defense on Ryan on the last play of the game. Just a lot to like about him. And then the thing I like about it, you got talent. You got Peyton, you got Jameer, you got talented guys up there, but you also got some dogs that probably have a little chip on their shoulder. Red Morgan's probably mad. Why ain't I ranked higher? Drake Kirkpatrick, why ain't I ranked higher? You can see that. Not ideal size, but dude, productive. They are on the field. They come up and hit you. They make plays. And, some guys, the ball just finds them. It's like the ball's chasing Dre, right? He looks up and he's around the ball, and that's because how good his instincts are. He was great in Alabama, Mississippi All-Star game. So a guy we don't talk about enough because I think we went in, and I was guilty of this. I think we went into legacy signee, right? I think we went into, it's Dre's son. You got to take him. But I think of his, I think of his last name. with Smith, Trey Smith, I think we would talk about him more. What a great year he had, because I think we kind of took him for granted because of his dad. But Andrew's right. His senior year, fantastic. I haven't seen many years with that many special teams touchdowns. The ball finds him. He finds the ball. I mean, Jameer Grimsley's huge upside. You still got Zay Mincy up there, but T-Rob, whole staff did a great job. But I know T-Rob is very hands-on with those defensive backs. I know Saban's very involved. So just, A+ across the board for me.
There you go, guys. I'm kind of bummed we don't have any specialist signees to talk about. We had Connor Talty last year. I know there's a couple of PWOs from our Northridge Jags, I guess, Andrew, that are lined up to join Alabama football in 2024, but no specialists. I guess we'll just have to go with what we've got.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Hey, let's talk about that. Let's talk about special teams.
I was trying to remember their
got return guys. Yeah, you got return
Travis
guys.
Not talk about it.
Cut that part out.
Yeah, I don't know. You kind of wonder, like I still haven't understood how you recruit for a field goal kicker, for instance. Like, I don't understand. Like, to me, unless you got Will Riker, you're signing one every year till you get your guy, right? Because we've seen a lot of highly recruited guys across the world, over the years, across the nation, who just haven't panned out. I mean, unless it's been a Sebastian Janikowski, no-brainer, I just feel like it's kind of a crapshoot. And that's also a testament to how good Will's been. He's basically the field goal equivalent of J.K. Scott, right?
Yeah.
Remember Nick Saban hugged J.K. like, dude, COVID year's coming. Hold on. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm curious to see how they fill those roles. Long snapper's always an interesting one. Those guys aren't very valued, but they're valued by the coaches. They don't see a lot of scholarships. So,
yeah, I think, James Burnip has evolved into a really good punter. Took him a couple of years coming over from Australia to get there. I know we talk about getting guys into camps to be able to watch them. I think it's as important, if not more, when you talk about field goal kickers, especially because Alabama has that specialist camp, and I've been to it before, and you kick right in front of Nick Saban live. There's no hiding. There's no whatever. And that's as much of a pressure situation as I could think of for a kicker. But Alabama should be okay. And as we said, some return guys in this class too. Really dynamic return options.
I do think that Alabama's excited about Connor Talty, who they signed in last year's class out of Chicago. At first, Connor was thinking that he was going to be the guy because Reichert had declared that he was going to the NFL, and
Senior
he
Bowl.
was expected to come in and make an impact, or not. We don't know if he was going to make an impact, but we know he was going to play a lot this season if Reichert wouldn't have been here. So I think they're excited about him. And then, as you mentioned, there's definitely some guys that can make big impacts in the return game, whether that's, Jalen Mbakwe, Ryan Williams. We'll talk about him more in February, but that's a guy that can be hard to keep him off the field.
I'm not going to rule out Dre as a punt returner at some point in his career. I mean, his hands look phenomenal. Half the battle for returning punts is just catching the ball, right?
Absolutely. And I guess I saved myself there with the return talk. So I didn't put you guys through too much. I
was not going to let you not talk about special teams.
Nealon Hibbett coming back at snapper, by the way. Guy's been good this year. Really good. So just some things, guys. I think that's just about it for the grades, though, right? We good with those, Andrew?
I think so. I mean, we went through each position group. I think we gave some solid grades out there. We weren't too over the top, but obviously we gave a few A+ at quarterback and defensive back, and I think that wide receiver tight end group can get to that A+ here in the next month and a half. So overall, another terrific job by Coach Saban and his staff.
Yeah, I love the class. I think when you look at what they did on the heels of last year, I think you look at how they closed out. There's always like a doubt factor. How will they finish? Will they ever flop at the finish line? They never do. You know what I mean? They always come up with some guys. They've always got the thing I think the staff does a great job of is not just a plan A, which I think they're as good as anybody in the country, but there's a plan B and a plan C and sometimes a plan D. So they're going to get them. You know what I mean? Offensive tackles are an instance where they just would have liked to have one. They didn't have to have one. So secondary, they wanted to attack, and, fantastic job. So not surprised. Assistants do a great job. Nick Saban, Alabama sells itself.
Sells itself indeed. And guys, hope you both have a very Merry Christmas. Of course, things aren't going to slow down much for us at BamaOnLine.com. That wheel just keeps turning round and round, and that'll be the case throughout the holiday season. Of course, getting you ready also for Alabama's huge Rose Bowl matchup with the University of Michigan on New Year's Day. Merry Christmas, Andrew Bone. Merry Christmas, Tim Watts. Merry Christmas to our viewers and subscribers out there too.
Absolutely. We appreciate you guys. And I know there's a lot of questions, a frustrating process sometimes. We appreciate you. We love the message board for the most part. A couple of you're on my naughty list, but for the most part, you're on our good list.
You still got time though, right, Andrew?
Yeah.
Some of the naughty list folks, there's still a little time.
Come hang out with us on BamaOnLine.
Absolutely. Hang out with us on the roundtable or premium message board there at BamaOnLine.com. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast and our YouTube channel, you need to do both of those things. Easy as a click or two. Share that YouTube website with your friends and turn on those notifications. You'll get all this video content as it drops on the YouTube home for BamaOnLine.com. For Tim Watts and Andrew Bone, Travis Reier, happy holidays to each and every one of you. And until next time, so long, everybody.